So, how does a boy nicknamed Troublemaker end up becoming a global symbol for peace? It sounds impossible, right? Well, today we're going to dive into the incredible life of Nelson Mandela. It's a journey that really shows you how one person's spirit can literally change a nation and inspire the entire world. And really, his entire story boils down to these three things: courage, forgiveness, and this just relentless dedication to justice. And we're not just talking about nice words here. These were his actual tools. This is what he used to take apart a brutal system and, build something entirely new for South Africa. Okay, so where do we even start with a story this big? Well, it doesn't begin in some fancy government building. Nope. It starts in a small village with a little boy whose name, well, it pretty much predicted everything that was to come. He was born Raleighlala Mandela on July 18th, 1918, in a tiny village. But it's that first name, Raleighlala, that I really want you to focus on because it is so incredibly fitting. Because, get this, in his native Xhosa language, Raleighlala literally means troublemaker. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like his destiny was written right into his name, the rebellious spirit who would one day shake an entire system to its core. But, his path to activism wasn't an overnight thing. He grew up in a tribal community, learning about respect and tradition. He was a great student, but it was really at university where that political spark, it just caught fire. From there, he moves to the big city, Johannesburg, becomes a lawyer, and then in 1944, he makes a decision that changes everything. He joins the African National Congress. All right, so this growing sense of justice, this political fire, it's headed straight for a collision with an incredibly brutal system. His activism wasn't just a hobby. It was a direct reaction to oppression. And as we're about to see, the price he would pay for that defiance was absolutely immense. And here it is, the turning point. In 1948, the government officially puts apartheid into law. We're talking about a system of just systematic racial segregation, denying Black South Africans their most basic human rights. So for Mandela and the ANC, this wasn't about politics anymore. This was a fight for survival, a fight for dignity. So this led to a major shift in strategy. You got to understand, at first, the ANC was all about nonviolent protests. But what happens when you're met with just brutal state violence every single time? Well, they felt they had no choice. So in 1961, Mandela co-founded the ANC's armed wing to engage in sabotage. This wasn't a choice they wanted to make. It was a decision they felt was born out of pure necessity. And the price for that defiance? Twenty-seven years in prison. I mean, just pause for a second and let that number really sink in. That's more than a quarter of a century locked away, all for fighting for the freedom of his people. And those 27 years, they weren't easy. He was sentenced to life in '64 and sent to the notorious Robben Island. We're talking brutal conditions, forced labor, long stretches of isolation, just constant grinding hardship. But here's the amazing part. Instead of letting it break him, Mandela turned prison into his university. He used the time to study, to sharpen his mind, and to strengthen his resolve. Okay, so after all those decades of darkness, things finally started to shift. The world was changing, and the pressure on South Africa was becoming unbearable. This next part of the story, this is about his freedom and how he walked out of prison not as a broken man, but as a leader ready to make peace. And then, on February 11th, 1990, it happened. After all that pressure, both inside South Africa and from all over the world, Nelson Mandela was a free man.
Can you just imagine that moment? It was like a switch was flipped, igniting hope across the country and signaling that the end of apartheid was finally within reach.
So, what's the first thing he does with this newfound freedom? Think about it. He had every reason to seek revenge, to call for a civil war, but he didn't. Instead, he chose reconciliation. And this right here, this might be the single most important decision of his entire life. He decided to sit down and negotiate with the very people who had locked him away, all to unite a country that was just tearing itself apart. And that brings us to the absolute peak of his life's journey. I mean, from political prisoner to president of the very nation that held him captive, it's an incredible story. And it's where he really cements this legacy of forgiveness that we still talk about today. And that journey from prisoner to president happened incredibly fast. I mean, look at this timeline. He's released in 1990. He then leads the talks to take apart the entire apartheid system. And just 4 years later, in 1994, South Africa holds its first ever democratic elections for all its citizens. And of course, Mandela is elected president in a landslide. Now, as president, he launched one of his most powerful and, most controversial ideas, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. The goal here was not punishment. It wasn't about getting even. It was about healing. It was this radical, painful process where victims could finally tell their stories, and the people who committed these terrible acts could come forward. The whole point was to confront the past head-on so they could actually build a future together. And of course, Mandela's impact went way beyond South Africa. He won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993, and even after he stepped down as president, he never stopped fighting for peace and human rights. He truly became a global icon, a kind of moral compass for the entire world. So, when you boil it all down, what's the big lesson here? Mandela's life really teaches us what true leadership looks like. It's not about having power or a fancy title. It's about integrity. It's about empathy. And it's about having the incredible strength to unite people, even people who were once your enemies, for a cause that's bigger than any one person. And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? Mandela showed the world one way forward, a path built on truth and forgiveness. But his legacy is also a challenge to all of us. It makes you ask yourself, right? In our own lives, in our own communities, what does true reconciliation really take?